Oh,
And then give it, hand it over. Just wait for President Wilshire to return. See, I didn't eat your lunch.
I don't get good information.
You must have.
I just hear rumors. Just don't know anything.
I heard about it.
Well, you got flyers. I don't know flyers.
Usually your rumors are pretty accurate though, Tim.
I don't know about that.
I didn't know who, so that was surprising to me.
You have a pretty good track record so far.
One for one.
Oh, I know which one.
you gotta
You
open
gotta
the
open a
meeting?
meeting.
Oh, yeah, right. All right, I'm gonna open the special meeting of the Board of Aldermen on Monday, March 25th, 2024, at 7 PM in the Aldermanic Chamber. The prayer will be offered by Alderman O'Brien, and Alderman Dowd will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty of managing the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and the greatest happiness of our fellow citizens. So help me God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm gonna turn it over to
I'm gonna turn the meeting over to the Chair of the Budget Review Committee, Alderman Dowd. It's different sitting over here, you know?
Roll call.
roll call.
We need a roll call.
Roll call. When you hear your
Sounds
name,
now.
stand at attention. Alderman Wilshire,
Here?
Alderwoman Kelly,
I'm here.
Alderman Dowd,
Present.
Alderman Clee, Alderman Lopez, Alderman Sullivan,
Here.
Alderman Clemmons,
Here.
Alderman Senate,
Here.
Alderman Jettie,
Here.
Alderman Theobald,
Here.
Alderwoman Timmons,
Here.
Alderman Moran, Alderman Theobald.
I'm still here,
Thibodeau.
but different guy.
Yeah, I'm bad with the, you gotta get the more Gaelic pronunciation. It is still March. Alderman Gaveva,
Here.
and that's it. I think we have 13 present.
Okay, quorum. Mayor Donchis and Attorney Bolton are not here.
We only have 11 present. Yeah, 11.
We're 11?
Yeah.
Bad math.
Everybody was on late.
11, Mr. Chairman.
I'd just like to note that Resolution R-24015 has been removed by the sponsor, Mayor Donchis, and no longer needs a public hearing. and will be removed at the appropriate time during the Budget Review Committee meeting. We have several resolutions for public hearing this evening, and we will start with Resolution R-24010, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $10,325.50 of assigned fund balance into Fund 7024 Opioid Abatement Expendable Trust Fund. Is there anyone here? Yes.
Good evening, Bobby Bagley, Chief Public Health Official and Director for the City of Nashua's Division of Public Health and Community Services, to speak on behalf of the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund and the appropriation of the $10,325.50. The Opioid Abatement Trust Fund has allowed for us to be able to provide support to those in the community that are dealing with substance use disorder, and the funding allows for us to support them on their road or on their journey to recovery. We've been able to assist with rental assistance for those who are engaged in medically assisted treatment and sober living support for those also completing medically assisted therapy services. We found that when there's housing, people have stability, that they can maintain their sobriety in those services. We're also supporting the UU Church and the New Fellowship Baptist Church warming stations with this funding, and we've also been able to contract for staffing support for those warming centers, the one at the UU Church because that's overnight. We've also been able to support Lamprey's expanded MAT services that are provided at the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter. So the continuation of receiving this funding helps to support many of those activities. We are expecting for some of our other partnering agencies to submit applications for continued support and projects that will advance the work of preventing overdoses and deaths as a result of substance use disorder.
Are there any amplifying information questions that anyone on the board has? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. First item will be testimony in favor of R-24010. Seeing none, next is testimony in opposition to R-24010. Seeing none, testimony in favor once more.
I'm in favor.
You have to come to the microphone and give your name and address.
My name is Magdalene Patanchis, and my address is 36 Toll Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other testimony in favor? Seeing none, testimony in opposition? Seeing none, I'll now close the public hearing on Resolution R-24010 at 7:08 p.m. and open the public hearing on R-24011 at 7:08 p.m. R-24010 is authorizing the mayor to enter into an amended federal and project agreement with the state of New Hampshire and the town of Hudson for the purpose of rehabilitating the Taylor Falls and Veterans Bridges, to amend a related agreement for reimbursement with the town of Hudson, and to accept and appropriate $2,027,280 for the project. Is there anyone here to discuss? Oh, yes.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dan Hudson, City Engineer. So we entered into this original agreement prior to going out to bid on the project. Bids came in. Project cost has increased only about 1%, but the number has changed, and therefore we need to amend our project agreement with DOT. This is to rehabilitate the two bridges that connect us with Hudson. As described before, cost for this project is 80% federally funded, 20% local match. That local match is split evenly, 50-50, with the town of Hudson. So that's what this revised agreement entails. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any of the Aldermen have a question? Yes, Alderman Debo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this $2 million, that's part of this? Is that the additional amount, or is a part of this the additional amount?
So that's the federal share. The total project cost is $2,534,100. Of that, 506,820 is the local share, which we split with Hudson. So Nashua's cost will be $253,410.
And what's the extra?
So the additional beyond what the bid, the original agreement was $2,500,000 flat for the total project cost. It came in $34,100 higher than that. So small incremental increase as noted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Mr. Hudson, could you be, for the folks at home, just more definitive? The bridges we're talking about are the ones with the feeders coming in from East Hollow Street and Bridge Street, am I correct?
That's correct, and their local name, one is the Taylor Falls Bridge, the other is the Veterans Bridge. But yes, our umbilical cord, so to speak, to the east of Nashua.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Dan Hudson? Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, now I'll take testimony in favor of R 24011. None. Testimony in opposition? None. Once again, testimony in favor? None. And once again, testimony in opposition? None. Close the hearing on R 20011 at 7:11 PM. And open the public hearing on resolution R 24012 at 7:11 PM. R 24012 is relative to the supplemental appropriation of $5 million of assigned fund balance into Fund 7026, Capital Equipment Reserve Fund. Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. This particular request is a planned request. As you can see from the legislation, we have slightly over $20 million of assigned fund balance. What this appropriation will do is put $5 million into the capital equipment replacement fund and set us up for the purchases that will take place in fiscal '25 in the new budget that you will approve shortly. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Griffin? Alderman, yes. Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So, Mr. Griffin, could you just remind me what assigned fund balance refers to? What is that?
Certainly. So the two major funds in our financials is the unassigned fund balance, which our rating agencies like us to grow at a certain percentage. And in fact, there's legislation that requires us to have at least 10% in assigned fund balance, in a unassigned fund balance. Assigned fund balance is what I can do as the chief financial officer of assigning surplus to this particular fund that is for future liabilities, of which SURF is one. The next, Director Cummings is going to talk about the next one, but it's really unassigned funds plus assigned funds, but to use either one of those, Board of Aldermen has to approve the appropriations.
Follow up?
Please. So the term assigned fund balance, is it assigned already, or what we're doing with it now is we're assigning it? It's now going to be assigned fund balance.
So it's actually a concept that takes it out of that unassigned fund balance, the $33 million that we have, assigns it for future liabilities, and we've used it for, as you may recall, we needed to use it for the teacher's contract. We needed to use it for last year. There's not enough money in the retirement, city retirement, when that's going to be on, that's coming up too. But the assignment is to put it away, and now I'm asking you, or recommending that you appropriate it for a need. It's just, it makes the city's financials and the discussions with the rating agencies easier if we systematically grow the unassigned and then have money assigned. And furthermore, we already had our meetings with the rating agencies last year. We told them about what our strategy was on this particular amount, as well as there's another one coming up in the next public hearing.
Okay.
Follow up?
Thank you. So, I don't mean to jump the gun here, but, the amounts that we're being asked to appropriate tonight, I think, I can't remember, it comes up to close to 10 million. And so, can you, is it fair to ask you right now what the plan is for, I noticed there's a $20 million balance, and we're appropriating with these resolutions 10 million, so that the rest of that 10 million, is there a plan for that? Do we know what we're gonna be doing with that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
over the last few years, we've had a balance of approximately $10 million in assigned fund balance. As I just said, we informed the rating agencies what we were gonna do when we knew we had another 10 million to assign. So bringing down this balance from 20 to 10 is consistent with our representations to the rating agencies. The remaining 10, the needs have not appeared yet, but it's a good balance for consistency. The 10 million, if something happened that we needed to come to the Board of Aldermen to appropriate, it needs to be kind of a really good answer. The rating agencies look at fund balance to include unassigned fund balance, assigned fund balance, and a few other key metrics that they look at for stability in our ratings. But the direct answer is we don't foresee coming before you again this fiscal year asking you to appropriate more money out of that assigned fund balance. We're comfortable with the $10 million number that remains after these several supplemental appropriation requests.
Thank you.
All set. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you.
Now I'll now take testimony in favor of R 24-012. Seeing none. Testimony in opposition. Seeing none. Once again, testimony in favor of R 24-012. Seeing none. And once again, testimony in opposition to R 24-012. Seeing none. I will now close the hearing on R 24-012. It's 7:18 PM. And open up the hearing on R 24-013 at 7:18 PM. Relative to the supplemental appropriation of $4 million of assigned fund balance into Fund 6600 Benefit Self-Insurance Fund. Anyone here to give us any information on that?
Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Griffin already gave it.
Online.
Director Cummings.
Director Cummings?
Yes, I am here, Mr. Chairman.
In absentia?
Yes, I apologize for not being present this evening.
Okay. You wanna give us-
If you'd like, I could give you a quick overview or rationale as to why we're here.
Yes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, and as CFO Griffin pointed out, this has been part of our plan from the beginning of the fiscal year, where we knew we were going to take some of that $20 million in assigned fund balance and transfer it around to various appropriate accounts. The Benefits Self-Insurance Fund is one of those accounts. As you may recall, I was before you in the fall talking about some of the costs for administering our various health care programs in the city and the trends that we're seeing in healthcare, where we're around 10% at the time, and they're only continuing to escalate. So the plan has always been that we would transfer some additional monies into this account so we can continue meeting our obligations. And just to give some folks a preview as to what to anticipate in FY25, we don't believe we will be transferring anything less than 10%. CFO Griffin and I are working on that right now with our consultants, but it looks as though that the number is going to be even greater this year than what we had put in last year. But that is, again, just the way the numbers seem to be trending at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Director Cummings. Any questions for Director Cummings from the board? No amplifying questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director Cummings.
Thank you.
I'll now take testimony in favor of R 24-013. Seeing none. Testimony in opposition of R 24-013. Seeing none. Once again, testimony in favor of R 24-013. Seeing none. And once again, testimony in opposition. Seeing none. I will close the hearing on public hearing on R 24-013 at 7:21 p.m. and open up the hearing on R 24-014 at 7:21 p.m. Relative to the supplemental appropriation of $500,000 of assigned fund balance into Fund 7025 City Retirement Trust Fund. Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. This seems to be an annual occurrence before you where we try to budget $500,000 in, not NRS, not New Hampshire Retirement System, but this is the final payouts to our retired members. So as of a few weeks ago, there's nothing left in the account. So what that means is we paid out $500,000 in final payments to our former staff members, and this $500,000 is designed to take us through at least the end of this year, this fiscal year. There's some retirements that I know about, and we're obligated to make these payments. So the $500,000 goes into this trust fund, paid out, and any balance remaining will carry over to fiscal '25.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, congratulations on your retirement. I'm sure you'll be glad to not have questions from us anymore. But second, so this is all yours, right? No, I'm just kidding.
No.
You said that we go over, we have to do this pretty much every year. So is retirements, have we had more retirements every year than we expect? Or like, why isn't it like, why aren't we able to budget it so that we don't have to grab this money every year?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's been a struggle to budget as close to what's needed. And the reason for this trust fund is so the operating departments don't have to budget for it, because that would be a real wild card. So it contains the non-school retirements. I remember like, it was my second year here, there was like 1.9 million of retirements. Events happen, changes in NHRS stuff, and so very difficult. So we look at this as kind of probably the most prudent thing to do is go through the year, see what's needed. And the fire department, police department, very communicative. They let us know. So it's difficult. And the other thing is if we make the 500,000 a million, then you have, 0.2% on the tax rate. So we try to manage it effectively, and knowledge that we actually have surplus that we can assign and then ask you folks to appropriate. That's probably the best way I think we can go forward.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you.
I'll now take testimony on R 24-016. in favor? Seeing none. Testimony in opposition? Seeing none. Once again, testimony in favor? Seeing none. And once again, testimony in opposition? Seeing none. I will now close the public hearing on Resolution R 24016 at 7:25 PM.
I think we're only
That
on
was one.
015. Oh, 4, yeah, 4, 'cause we're skipping that.
014.
We're moving to 1.
Right.
Then
725.
24025. Is that what I said, or is there's none other ones on my, oh, there's one that we're not taking up.
Which is
015, we're not taking up.
We're not
But
taking
we were
up.
still on 1-4.
Yeah, you were ahead of the game by 1.
Yeah, we just discussed
I'm sorry. You're right.
014.
Right. So relative to the supplemental appropriation of $150,000 of assigned fund balance in the Department of Risk Management account, 889650 transfer to property and casualty self-fund, that is not going to be taken up.
Right.
Okay.
The
Right.
person that sponsored it is taking it off, so we don't need a public hearing on it. So, now, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right, R 24016, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $53,442 of assigned fund balance in the school department accounting unit 91.1.992225, account number 553628, contract services. Is there anyone here to explain? Mr. Donovan?
Good evening, Dan Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. These costs relate to the cyber attack that took place last spring, specific to our student information system. So the budget was completed by the time we knew what these costs were. These costs, specific costs, came to light in the summer. And basically, the 53,000, simply put, is broken into two pieces. One, 19,100, which was related to the implementation of setting up the cloud system, and then the cost of about 25,000, actually, sorry, 34,000, which is the cost of keeping the student information system up on the cloud. Not the IT guy, but what we have done with a lot of our significant software systems is we've moved them to the cloud, where I would assume, at least in my knowledge, they're a lot safer than being on our internal server.
Questions for Mr. Donovan? Seeing none, thank you. All right. I'll now take testimony in favor of R 24016. Seeing none. Testimony in opposition to R 24016. Seeing none. Testimony once again in favor of R 24016. Seeing none. And once again, testimony in opposition of R 24016. Seeing none. So,
What time you closing it?
I'm closing it at 7:29. And opening up at 7:29, R 24025. Authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to borrow an amount not to exceed $2,500,000 through the issuance of bonds and/or a loan through the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services State Revolving Loan Fund for the wastewater treatment plant Class A biosolid and maintenance building project. Yes.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave Boucher, wastewater superintendent. I'll just give a brief overview of what the Class A biosolids project is. The wastewater treatment facility currently processes sludge removed from the wastewater. We create a Class B biosolids with it, which is limited to land disposal on licensed property. The regulations on biosolids have been evolving, resulting in some communities making rapid decisions to limit or ban Class A biosolids for beneficial reuse, which has driven up the cost of disposal. By further drying the Class B biosolids, this would convert it into a Class A biosolid, which can be land applied in more locations. This process makes the product much lighter, reduces the volume, less trucking, also reduces the landfill disposal cost should that become mandated. We are currently in the preliminary design phase, exploring different technologies for producing the Class A biosolids, as well as exploring different locations at the wastewater facility to actually build the process. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Any clarifying questions?
I have a question. Why the redesignation?
I'm sorry, we can't take public questions. When you come up, you can either speak in favor or opposition. Right now, we're just having amplifying questions from the Board of Aldermen in case they don't fully understand what's being discussed.
Okay.
And I see no one. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll take public input on R-24-025, testimony in favor. Seeing no one, none. Testimony in opposition. Did you want to comment?
I don't want to comment, I want to ask a question.
You can ask a question.
You can come up and ask a question, and is it in opposition or in favor?
I don't have enough information yet. So I'd like to.
Name and address for the record, please.
Yep, for the record, my name is Magdalene Patanchis. My address is 36 Toll Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064. And my question is, why the redesignation to Class A from Class B?
Somebody want to answer that from?
Thank you, Dave Boucher, wastewater superintendent. It would be a change from Class B to Class A. Currently, per the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, we are the last Class B producing facility in New Hampshire. Going to Class A gives us more options for disposal. There's concerns about contaminants in the soil, which regulatory agencies have been put regulations on, such as the PFOS is pretty prevalent. So it limits our disposal options. It has doubled the cost for disposal, currently disposing the Class B. So by producing a Class A, reduces our cost.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
For now, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other testimony in favor? Seeing none, any testimony in opposition? Seeing none, once again, testimony in favor? Seeing none, once again, testimony in opposition? Seeing none. Now we'll close the public hearing at 7:33 PM. And Alderman O'Brien, if you would indulge us in the last motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion that the March 25th, 2024 special meeting of the Board of Aldermen be so adjourned.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:33 PM. Take a 5-minute break and go into budget. Meeting of,
Hang on.
hang on.
Whoa.
All right, I'd like to commence the meeting of the Budget Review Committee. It's Monday, March 25th, 2024, at 7:38 PM in the Aldermanic Chamber. I'm chair and presiding in the meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Theobald,
Here.
Alderman Senate,
Here.
Alderman Sullivan,
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly,
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire,
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present, and our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
All in attendance, I have a quorum. First item on the agenda is public comment on anything being addressed this evening. For anyone that wishes to present comment on anything coming before budget this evening. Seeing none, we'll move on. Communications,
There are none?
unfinished business,
There are none.
none. New business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-24-010, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $10,325.50 of assigned fund balance into Fund Number 7024 Opioid Abatement Expendable Trust Fund. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
The motion on the floor before us is to recommend final passage of R-24-010 to the full Board of Aldermen. Are there any questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Director Bagley, if she's still here. She doesn't mind speaking. So I look at this, and it's a small amount of money, really, when you think about it. And so, to me, fighting this national problem, really, probably could use more money than that. So my first question really is this money recovering money we've already spent? And I know you mentioned the shelters and some of the other things that we're doing with it. Or is it money that's going to be put into the fund so we're using in the future? And second part of that question is more for, I want people to know, the things we're using it for, because it is so important that we're helping as a city to help this problem. So I guess if we're using it for something in the future, what exactly is it going to be used for as part of the recovery of people who are misusing these, the opioid stuff?
Yes, Director Bagley, City of Nashua Division of Public Health and Community Services. So this additional funding that we are receiving will be a part of the settlement that will go over the next 18 years from the pharmaceutical companies that were a part of the suit that was a national suit. So the City of Nashua, along with 21 other surrounding towns, are part of that suit. And so 15% of the total amount of money that's going to come to the state of New Hampshire will come to the City of Nashua, and the other 85% goes to the state as a whole. This funding will be entered into the fund that we have. We do have a fund balance that will support some of the work that we're continuing to do right now, so it's going to be in addition to. The interesting thing about the opioid abatement fund and the trust accounts that we have for the city and for the state is that the amounts of money that will come through, they come in different amounts. So we've received an amount as high as $53,000, we've received an amount $10,000, and so they come in different increments, but they will be over the next 18 years. 17 now. The expectation is that the funding, according to the legislation of which we've set this account up and the funding that's set up at the state level, is to continue to provide and support services that reduce opioid overdoses and opioid deaths. So prevention services, treatment services, medically assisted therapy. We can support housing, and that's what we've been using our funding for, because we found, again, when people are more stably housed, they can make better decisions about entering into treatment services and remaining into treatment services. So we tend to put out a request for funding applications from our city partners, and we've had several organizations over the course of the 2 years that we've had this account asked for different additional funding to support programs that they're providing services to individuals in the community. So, for instance, the Revive, they've asked for funding to support additional staffing that does outreach in the community. Lamprey, which is our latest funded organization, asked for additional funding to support MAT services that they provide at the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter when they're doing their outreach. The funding that we've used out of this account through the city has supported rental assistance, it's supported transportation. We've assisted individuals with getting their birth certificates, their driver's licenses, so they could get jobs. We've supported rental assistance for sober living support. So we have an individual that completed their MAT services or completed their recovery services, and they're in sober housing, but they don't make enough money to cover their rent, and so we support that as well. And as long as individuals are active in their journey in recovery, this funding will help support that. It'll also help support prevention services. So Stepping Stones submitted an application twice, and they've gotten funding for, again, additional services to prevent substance use disorders with youth, or opioid. It has to be very specific to opioid use disorders.
Great, I appreciate that. That's a really great explanation of the stuff you guys do, so thank you.
Yes. Alderman Lopez.
I agree wholeheartedly with the Housing First model that Director Bagley was mentioning. It's also probably helpful for prevention as a concept. I know it wouldn't necessarily work with the opioid abatement fund. You'd be able to help with this particular area, but when we have programs that are able to give people emergency housing, then they don't have to make deals with the devil like, okay, I guess I'll stay here tonight even though because it's freezing out, and maybe I'll try this just to fit in, and then they're sent down the whole path of now they're physically addicted, and they're not able to back out of that kind of situation. So in general, homeless outreach efforts are essential, not just to treating the crises that we have, but the crises that we could be having if we didn't have those. I was curious, with regards to the, I believe you said Lamprey medically assisted treatment. Is that the same program or similar to what they applied for CDBG funding for?
Bobby Bagley, Director of the City of
Yes,
National Tourism and Public Health Community Services. I am not sure, I didn't see that application. The funding that they did apply, the request that they made for us was a small amount of $6,600, and it was to cover the cost of the nurse practitioner and support staff for a number of hours over at the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter. So if they're expanding those hours, that may be what they applied for CDBG funds for, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay, I couldn't remember off the top of my head, and I didn't want to put you in the spot. And then the last thing was, I remember what happened with the state's tax money from, alcohol sales. Does the state have the ability to decide how much they're gonna give us, or to amend or adjust that?
Yes, go ahead, Alderman.
So the 15% is what's allocated to the 22 subdivisions, and so that's in legislation. I don't think that's something that can be changed.
Okay, so they
But-
can't just have their own motion and decide that they're gonna change their own rules?
While I'm on the Opioid Abatement Trust Commission, so I don't think that we're looking to entertain any changes on that. The City of Nashua, as well as any other town, can also apply for the 85% of the funds that the state gets as a whole as well. So there's additional funding that as a city or organizations in our city can apply for.
That's encouraging, and I wasn't suggesting that the committee that you're on would make that decision. I just know that the state legislature, as a budgetary choice, chooses regularly not to fully honor the amount of support they should be giving to recovery programs. And periodically, when they dip too low, then we start to see the results here in the community.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director Bagley.
Thank you.
All right, motion on the floor is for final passage of R 24-010. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Also before us this evening is R-24-011, authorizing the mayor to enter into an amended federal aid project agreement with the state of New Hampshire and the town of Hudson for the purpose of rehabilitating the Taylor's Falls and Veterans Bridges, to amend a related agreement for reimbursement with the town of Hudson, and to accept and appropriate $2 million, $27,280 for the project. If I get the number correct. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
So the motion on the floor is for R-24-011 to recommend to the full board final passage. Any discussion? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only question to Mr. Hudson, in the meeting prior, he mentioned that there were RFQs that went out. Who picks, since it's a shared project with Hudson and in conjunction with the State Department of Transportation, at the end, who picks the contractor to fix the bridges?
Thank you. For the record, Dan Hudson, City Engineer. Excellent question. So the bridge construction went out to bid. If everything's in order, it's a low bid process. So Beck and Bellucci was the contractor, that was the low bidder, meeting all the requirements, and the project was therefore awarded to them.
Right, but who says that is it the state that is responsible, or is it a shared between the towns? I'm just concerned, who's in charge of the contractor?
Sure. So let me give you a little project history. So we're doing this cooperatively with the town of Hudson. Hudson advanced this project by completing the rehabilitation design. They selected an engineer, it was Du Bois and King. We participated in that design, funded half the design, but they managed the design process. For construction, given that Nashua has more resources for this sort of thing, it was agreed that Nashua would run the construction phase of the project. Du Bois and King's been retained in construction to help with amendments and that sort of thing as a design engineer. We also contracted with Hoyle Tanner, who the city had selected via RFQ process as the city's bridge engineer a few years ago, because the DOT requires that the design engineer not be the engineer doing the construction administration. So that's the team. City of Nashua is running this project. Hudson will reimburse us as we go through the project, as well as the DOT will reimburse us the 80% along the way of all expenses. But Nashua's running this phase.
Okay, makes sense.
All
Thanks.
set?
Yep.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Mr. Hudson, if you may, for what you know of it, but am I correct, and this is for the folks at home again, when we built these two bridges, they're not really owned by the state 100%. Nashua and Hudson collaborated to actually build them. We felt the need at the particular time, and this was the solution. So that's why this is set up exactly. If it was a regular state highway, then this would be taken over by the state. But the state of New Hampshire, being deep pockets like they are, they got into this deal. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, so these bridges are jointly owned by City of Nashua and the town of Hudson, so you're correct. I don't recall during the original construction. Original construction of one of the bridges was 1970. Second was 1973. They have not been rehabilitated since that time. So these bridges are, more than 50 years old. Often the DOT will participate in funding, but then the municipality will take the bridge over. This project is through their LPA program, or Local Project Administration Program. The City of Nashua is contracting with the entities. They're reimbursing 80%. So they share in the cost of constructing and rehabilitating municipally owned bridges within the framework of their various programs. And this is one of those. That's why they're participating at 80% of the cost. As long as you follow all their processes and procedures, dot all your I's, cross all the T's, all those sorts of things, then you're eligible for that funding.
Fair answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set. Yes, Engineer Hudson, are there any utilities that run across underneath those bridges?
Excellent question. So yes, there is. Pennachuck has a water main that doesn't need to be rehabilitated. So the work in this contract is mostly related to the deck. They're going to strip off, and they're going to do one bridge at a time. But they're going to strip off the pavement. They're going to, underneath is a concrete deck and membrane. They're going to rehabilitate the concrete, chip it away, restore it. Then there'll be a bridge membrane that goes on. It's basically like, you know, the roof on your house, seals everything. And then it'll get repaved. There'll be additional repairs made to concrete sidewalks and those sorts of things.
So much like our streets, if the utilities have to do something to their infrastructure, you don't want them to dig up the road again.
Correct.
So, unless they can get to it underneath, but are we coordinating with the utilities?
Yeah, we've coordinated with everyone, made them aware, but again, we're not doing much underneath the bridge. We're not like fully repainting the bridge or anything. The steel's actually in pretty good condition. It's mostly the concrete repairs we're doing, mostly up top. So yeah, it's that sort of a work. And credit to the town of Hudson for, you know, spearheading the design of this project. They had the foresight to try to get this rehabilitated before it fell into greater disrepair. Working collaboratively with us and my predecessor also, but to rehabilitate this before it fell further into disrepair and required more extensive, more costly treatment.
Just a curiosity question, who plows that bridge?
There's always one hard question. I don't have the answer to that. I apologize. But yeah, I'm sure it's Hudson or Nashua.
Okay.
We might, maybe both of us going, you know, to make the turnaround. I don't know.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Also before us this evening is R-24-012, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $5 million of assigned fund balance into Fund Number 7026, Capital Equipment Reserve Fund. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R-24-012. Are there any questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much. For CFO Griffin, actually on this resolution and the following two, where we're moving money out of the assigned fund balance into various funds. The first is specific to the SURF fund. I did notice that we had a balance of about $297,000 after, we have about $5 million of encumbrances. Encumbrances to me mean pending transactions. Is that basically what that is? Okay. So my question for this resolution and then the following two, why are we moving the money now in March of fiscal year '24 when we have a budget season coming up? Why now as opposed to in 2 months?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. As maybe a little background, we always try to fund the ensuing year in the prior year using surplus. We also, several years ago, we kept deferring purchasing what was on the SURF list. At some point, all of that catches up with you. So now we're running at about $5 million a year of general fund SURF purchases. So inasmuch as we put the surplus in the assigned fund balance, it seemed to me, for this and the next two, it seemed to me a good use of assigned fund balance to essentially create a situation where we don't have to budget SURF dollars in fiscal '25. If we didn't use this method, what would happen is we put $5 million in the transfer to SURF line, which is 2% on the tax rate. So that's what the SURF. The next one, as Director Cummings talked about, we need to get a reasonable balance in that benefits fund where Director Cummings had explained with our WBS consultant that it's rather, the balance is kind of ebbing and flowing close to zero, so we need to shore that up. And then, as I mentioned, on the 500,000 for this, for the final payments to our staff members who retired. Just a good use of funds. I like this approach relative to escrowing money. As you all recall, the discussion on the escrow, 3 million last year, kind of gummed up the works. It was kind of part of a $6 million, $7 million array of needs. So I recommended to the mayor to come in with this approach. Love to be able to fund the SURF on an ongoing basis every year and not rely on surplus, but as I mentioned, $5 million is 2% on the tax rate, so as the mayor likes to say, right if you do anything else, you've got 2% increase. So hopefully that's kind of the strategy behind it, and I'm comfortable that at the end of this, if approved, we'll have 10 million in assigned fund balance that the rating agencies are used to looking at.
Follow-up question, man?
So if I hear you correctly, the reason behind the timing is you do it now because the assigned fund balance at the end of the fiscal year is kind of matured in that there's money that's flowed into it, so you have a nice balance in there that you can pay forward into fiscal '25 as budgets become more clear, needs become more clear, budgets become more clear, so you can strategically move that money. That's what I heard. It's just that was my curiosity around the why move it now.
But one other point I think I'd like to make is Alderman Sullivan referenced the encumbrances. So those are purchase orders that we haven't spent the money out of. So as you've witnessed the ordering of things in the Finance Committee, it's not as quick as it used to be. You order a vehicle and it's right there. There's a time lag. So when you were looking at the $300,000 balance, that is the balance. That's it. But there's $5 million worth of items that we're purchasing, and the same thing is going to happen in fiscal '25. We're going to have a beginning balance of $5 million, and the teams are going to be ordering things to that, to their approved SURF schedule that you folks will approve in the budget process.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All set?
Yep.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Seeing none? Okay. The motion on the floor is for final passage of R 24012. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Also before us this evening is R-24-013, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $4 million of assigned fund balance into Fund 6600, Benefit Self-Insurance Fund. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage to the full Board of Aldermen of R 24013. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And also, Mr. Chairman, before us this evening is R-24014, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $500,000 of assigned fund balance into Fund 7025, City Retirement Trust Fund. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24014 to the full Board of Aldermen. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's a tricky one.
Yeah. And, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to withdraw from the committee resolution R-224-105.
It should be R 015.
015. Duly noted.
This is the one that the mayor has taken out because we don't need it after that discussion we had. So the motion is to withdraw it from consideration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us is R-24-015, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $150,000 of assigned fund balance into the Department 128 Risk Management Account 89650, transferred to the Property and Casualty Self-Insurance Fund. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to indefinitely postpone.
Motion on the floor is to indefinitely postpone R-24-015. There are no questions. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Also before us this evening is R-24-016, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $53,442 of assigned fund balance into School Department Accounting Unit 91.1992225, account number 53628, Contract Services. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R-24-016. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. Also before us is R-24-025, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to borrow an amount not to exceed $2,500,000 through the insurance bonds and a loan through the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Service State Revolving Loan Fund for the wastewater treatment plant, Class A biosolid and maintenance building project. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is R-24-025, recommending the full board of Aldermen final passage. Any questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Real quick, not an issue with anything in the resolution, just bookkeeping question. The bonding on the debt service, is that gonna show up under debt service in the general fund, or does it show up under debt service on the wastewater enterprise fund?
Mr. Griffin?
John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector, Alderman Sullivan, and the other members. That shows up in the wastewater debt service. So we have city debt service, school debt service, wastewater debt service, solid waste, et cetera, and you'll see those in the debt pages of the budget book.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All set?
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Also before us is R-24-027, authorizing the expenditure of $100,000 from the Conservation Fund for long-term maintenance, repairs, and protection of natural and watershed services. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board of Aldermen final passage of R-24-027. Alderman Sullivan, I'm sure you want to speak to it?
Yes, quickly, and also the very capable Deb Chisholm is here as well. Okay, I didn't see you at first. I panicked. I'm the sponsor of this because I'm the aldermanic liaison for the Conservation Commission, and at the last meeting, towards the end, they had outlined a lot of the needs that they have. And bigger picture, just to back up a little bit, there is about 1.7 million sitting in the conservation fund and that we need to create this resolution in order to allow them to spend the money. They had, over about a 7-year period, they had spent about, I'm rounding up, $83,000. They now have new items. They want to take this money, they want to spend it on forest management plans, trail mapping, tools, tarps, landscape, tree removal, technical assistance from arborists and certified wetland scientists, beaver management, invasive species management contractor, and then also educational and outreach. I believe the total, Ms. Chisholm can correct me, but I believe the total was about 83 to 86,000. It was my recommendation that they just round up to an even $100,000. So to avoid the exercise of having to create another resolution in case there were needs, or some of these costs, because they were ballparking some of these costs. So in case that there were some overages on some of the services, just wanted to make sure that there was enough there to handle it.
Yeah, I see no problem with that. Those beaver down on Buck Meadow are hard to fight.
Well, that was, there was a big beaver battle going on
Yeah,
down there.
yeah. All right. I've had complaints already, and, no, I haven't referred them to you yet, but told them we're acting on
I
it.
appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions, Alderman Tebow?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So my question is, if you don't need the 100,000, does that money go back into the account, or like, how does that work, I guess, if you don't need it? Or do you now, that, because you have it, find ways to use it, since I'm sure there's always something that needs to be done, I guess? I don't know if that's a question for Alderman Sullivan or Deb Chisholm.
I believe there's someone way more qualified than me to answer that.
Good evening, Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Department Manager and the staff person for Conservation Commission. As Alderman Sullivan mentioned, excuse me, the monies that the Conservation Commission has spent between 2016 and 2023 came up under several resolutions. The idea of this one was to put it all into one so that we didn't have to keep coming back. And the monies will be, there's not an actual account per se, but the folks in the finance department keep very close tabs on what the money is spent on, and we'll just continue to spend it. There's no real time limit. We'll just continue to spend it on the items that we've sort of listed out. If something new comes up, you know, we'll have a discussion at Conservation Commission. Basically, the way they expend funds is they will vote every time there needs to be a purchase, unless it's a small purchase, folks going out to buy tarps or shovels or things. But if there's going to be, say, one of the things on the list is trail mapping. We'd like to hire a National Regional Planning Commission. They've already got a whole set of trails already set up, and we'd like to expand on that. So once that comes forth in a proposal, then we'll vote on it and sort of make it known in the meeting minutes what we're spending the money on.
Great, excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I can tell you that things on the Conservation Commission, having been the liaison the last term, things come up all the time, so I'm sure that they will spend the money very judiciously. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Also before us this evening is R-24-0131. Approving the cost items of a sidebar agreement between the Nashua Board of Police Commissioners and 2 Nashua Police Department unions regarding outside details. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
So the motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R-24-031, and I see we have a couple of able-bodied persons here to talk to it. Chief? Not gonna bring your right-hand person up with you?
Of course. Chief of Police Kevin Rourke. So the unions approached us in the fall about changing the detail rate, outside detail rate, and It hasn't been changed in over 20 years. It was set earlier at the second-year officer's rate, time and a half. And during the last 20 years, we've had a lot of different details come in city events, and with the change in the retirement system in 2011, it got real confusing with the different types of pay. I think Karen can attest to that. Her office dealt with it, and we've done a really good job with it, but it was time to kind of streamline the process and make it make sense, so it'd be easier for the city and Karen in her office. So every detail now will be categorized by outside detail, and again, outside detail is paid by an outside entity, Eversource, whatever company it is. They foot the bill. Mandatory details, which can be some in the city, but also outside, and mandatory assignments. Like I said, it's been confusing over the years, especially for the city and Karen to deal with this. For the post-2011 hires, these new rates will allow our newer officers who were adversely affected by the retirement system to make extra money and to invest it towards their retirement. The negative changes to the retirement system have proven to be our biggest liability and hurdles to overcome in terms of retention of officers. And I'll just give you some stats that I looked up recently, and stuff that we never saw, especially in my career. When guys came to this agency, they stayed for 20 years. We'd lose excuse me, very little to outside agencies. If we did, it would be Mass State Police, or we'd lose some to the federal agencies, the DEA, FBI. Now we're seeing that guys are leaving and gals are leaving to go in the private sector. So over the last 5 years, we've lost 66 officers. 37 of those have been to resignation, 29 have been retirement, that's 20+ years. But out of those 37 that have left, 29 have gone to the private sector. That's quite alarming. You know how much money we put into people that we bring here and how we train them, and it just to get someone up and running, going through the academy and their FTO period is a substantial amount of money. So that's a hit to us when we lose 37 people. Now, this is not a Nashua PD problem, as you know. It's around the country. I was just at an international conference last week in Alabama, and Connecticut State Police are down 300 state troopers. That's out of 1,200. So they're down a quarter of their agency. And like I've said before, you've heard me say it, there's not a lot of people that want to do this job. We used to have 300-400 people taking our test. Last week we had 16. So we got to think of new ideas to come up with to keep these people. And no one around the country seems to have the right idea. But we try to think outside the box. And I think doing this brings officers here that are trained, certified officers, or it brings new officers in when they want to come to the right department. So you've done a great job of supporting us, and the community has done a great job of supporting us. Last I checked, we're still highest paid in the state. What we did years ago when you guys supported it is our certified officers are paid more money. They get credit for their service. This is just another thing. I did an analysis around the state, because I'm not the only PD doing this, thinking outside the box for details and retention reasons. And right now, we are underpaid for a lot of communities around us. This brings us up to par and above several agencies by a couple dollars. So with those stats and retention problem that we have, I think this was a good time to bring this forward to you. Like I said, it's very important to stay above some of these agencies. You've already backed us up on that, and this is just another tool that we can do. I think when Karen ran the numbers of some of the city events that we have, I think this would cost a little less than $5,000 because of the events that we have citywide, the 4th of July, the holiday strolls, some of the parades that we do. So it's a very little cost. I'll take any questions if you have it.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, how are you?
Good, how are you, sir?
Good. Like most citizens, as I drive down the street, I see a cruiser from another community, on our streets, and I appreciate their help and diligence and, doing supervising for the safety, the construction projects and stuff like that. But to me, there's nothing better than have the homegrown department to be in charge. This sidebar agreement will help alleviate this to make it more worthwhile for our officers to work. I mean, let's face it, I imagine on a July afternoon when it's 90-something degrees, it's blood money, when you're standing out there in the sun. But this will help alleviate that, correct?
Yes, sir, it will, and that's a great point. Thank you. I want them out there too, so this is a little more incentive to do that.
Okay, all set. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, when I was younger, back in the 70s, being a policeman was like pride, right? It was never really truly about money. We always thought that the policemen were always paid too low. Always thought that. And people stayed 30, 40 years, right? Whatever, like a lot more. Now today, it seems like the stuff that's taking them away from being a local policeman is the money in the private sector, which is so different than when we grew up. And so, I think this is a good plan. I mean, I'd prefer you working on ways to, stop more crime and be more into the community than having to worry about this all the time and worrying about losing your staff, because we need more police in the city, we need more police in the state. So is it truly just the money that's driving patrolmen to the private sector? Is it just purely money, or is there other things that are going on that's causing them to leave?
I think it's a big problem. Money could be one of them.
Okay.
But you also have the retirement change. That was very detrimental to this process in the state of New Hampshire. And what they did is and they're making more, like I'm in the old system, so I could retire at 20 years at age 45 and start collecting. Now these people have to do 25, 30 years. They're dealing with a lot more. So they look at it as a work-life balance and for their families. So, a lot of people want to work Monday through Friday. These people don't work Monday through Friday. They work weekends, holidays, and, in the climate weather. So there's a big spectrum to it, but it's part of it. And if we can help them stay here, and, we just received, last week I was down in Alabama, we just received our accreditation award, advanced accreditation. 461 standards, perfect score. There's a very few amount of police departments in the country that can say that. It's not because of me, it's because of the men and women out there that do it every day on the street, so.
Follow up, Alderman Tebow?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love our police force. I'm a big supporter of our police, and I do appreciate when they do these outside detail events and they're at different places, because it makes them safer, and it supports whatever the organization or the event is to keep it safe. I'm gonna support this wholeheartedly, and, just don't look at my brake light. Thank you.
Alderman McKellar?
Thank you, and thanks for being here, Chief.
Thank you.
I had a question around the categorization of the types of details. You said there was mandatory versus outside. How do you make that determination?
So outside is outside. If Eversource, I'm just using them as an example, there's multiple companies that call up for details. Gate City Casino. So there's some that are mandatory, right? Mandatory details. So we ran into this last year. It doesn't happen a lot. Gate City Marathon's one of them. If you have a big event, we have to, unfortunate, back in the day, we would have, 10 details, and, you'd have 45 people signing up. So it's come to that point where the event has to be safe. We have to make sure if there's 10 listed, that there's 10 out there. So at points now, we don't have the 45 people that sign up, we have 7. So then we have to make 3, I'm using Gate City Marathon as one. We need 10 posts to make it safe. We'll have to order 3 guys in. So mandatory assignments is different. That is something like the 4th of July, where if we need 40 guys up there, we're having 40 guys up there. So we were already kind of doing that before. You know, when you start out in this job, when you're the little man on the totem pole, you're gonna be working 4th of July and these parades, so that's the different, the 3 levels.
Follow up?
What about dignitaries who come to our state, because there's lots of them, and it's going to be a year of a lot of that. Where do they fall?
Where do they fall? If we put it as it could be an outside detail, where they might call up and say, hey, we need 3 guys.
Yep.
It could be a mandatory one where we know that there's gonna be a lot of people there, and then we'd make that call.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to agree with Alderman O'Brien with regards to the community events. We hold the Tree Streets Block Party regularly, and in the past couple of years, we've had trouble getting those details filled, and our humble little caution tape and garbage can stop is not the same as having a police officer there who can direct people, explain things. And, you know, volunteers are not a substitute for an officer who can say, hey, your car's not supposed to be pushing through this, like, you know, you need to make some other choices. So there's a lot of value to those different events and the volunteers that are trying to pinch it, to have the experience that the police bring to that. But on the other side, personally, I remember many officers, like Officer Carlos, for example, at community events, you know, cheering us on through the soup kitchen race and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a lot of value there for community policing as well. From the officers that I've talked to, they don't consider themselves just, you know, like enforcers of the law purely. A lot of officers are frustrated that they're forced to only do that, and they don't get to engage in different community activities. I know the POW officer's done a really good job of engaging the department and then the kids in the community. So I think this is helping officers make that decision that, okay, well, I'm gonna pull extra duty, I'm gonna do a little more in the community, but then, you know, when they're in the situation, then they're able to be part of the community that they're serving in a different way. So I think it's a great combination overall.
Alderman Liscia?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for being here, and thank you for thinking outside the box, trying to do everything you can to keep the staff that you have. I know how important it is to have the right people there. Also want to congratulate you and the department on your accreditation, 100% perfect score.
Thank you.
I know that
Thank
takes
you.
a lot of hard work.
Yes.
From everybody, not just 1 or 2 people, so congrats on that.
Thank you.
Yes, Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief, for being here. And, you know, I wanted to point out, thank you for the opportunity that you and your team gave me this past week to spend some time at the department, going ride along. Captain Hannon, Sergeant Enrico, both very welcoming. And this problem that we're discussing here, this problem of attracting and retaining, it's something that I observed goes department-wide. Everybody that I spoke to with National Police that Friday is really concerned about this. So I'm really glad to see this coming forward and to see a continued push to bring in officers, because we have a really great police department, and people should want to come and work for our police department, and we just need to find a way to get them. So thank you for everything that you guys do.
Sure, and just to comment on that, you know, you're speaking to many chiefs around the country at some of these events, and, you know, there's no doubt that departments have lowered their standards of hiring. And as your chief, I will never lower the standards. So, you know, there's many certified guys that apply here that they don't make it, and they won't get hired here. And you know, we're down 17, but we're all going to pay the price if we hire the wrong person, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, I appreciate
we
that
still
keen
have a
eye
high
for talent,
standard.
yeah.
We still have a high standard here.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Thanks, Chief, for being here. I do think that, you know, while money is not, you know, it's always nuanced, right? There's always a lot of pieces to the pie, but it's interesting how you say that we lose policemen to the private sector. When you were down at that consortium, I guess, did you talk about other things about the benefits? I mean, typically in the private sector, you walk through the door and you have a generous vacation package and things like that. You know, I think in your world, you know, you spoke to it low man on the totem pole has to work the holidays and things like that, and you have to earn your time,
Sure.
understandably. But do you have those other conversations outside of money, more the balance of life and the, you know, I guess the soft benefits, if you will?
Sure, and again, people that were hired before 2011 have different benefits, right? They don't get the buyout, you know, and that's some things that people consider, and now they're doing more time. So I think the more time thing is a problem, seeing themselves here for 30 years instead of 20 years. That's a major problem, and I think the working conditions, the benefits are great. I mean, some of the benefits we get are great, there's no doubt, and they will say that. But it kind of all adds up, you know, those couple things of the extra years. You know, imagine yourself being hired in 2011, and Alderman O'Brien, you might help me, but in August, I think the effect went in July 1st, right? And so if you were hired a month later, your whole life just changed, because now you have to do more time than the guy that was hired 2 months before you. So I think all those factors add up. And right now, it's not hard to get a job out there, and with good pay and good benefits, like you say. So they've picked the private sector. So that's what we keep hearing, the retirement system that changes. And when we lost guys, it might be 1 year. You know, now we're seeing guys anywhere from 1, you know, to 17 years cutting the cord, which is kind of alarming, you know.
Well, thanks for that, and congratulations on the accreditation. It's great.
Thank you, Chief. As you know, I appreciate everything you and the force does, and anything we can do to help you is we're certainly here to try and do that for you.
No, you've helped us tremendously over the last couple of years.
And, you know, I know that Manchester's trying to hire a bunch of police officers, the state's trying to hire a bunch of state troopers because they're short. So anything we can do to help to get officers here, we hopefully will, as a board, try to do that for you. And by the way, I'm hoping you're not thinking of retiring anytime soon.
Just don't talk to my
We'll have
wife.
Karen keep an eye on that. So, thank you for all you do, day to day, day in, day out, to keep Nashua the safest city. Thank you.
Thank you, and your support goes a long way with the officers in the building. I know that, I've heard that several times, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. All right, if there's nothing else, we're looking at R 24-031. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. New business ordinances,
There are none.
table and committee,
There is nothing.
general discussion. None?
No.
Oh, yeah. And then public comment.
Yeah.
Anyone for public comment?
Hi, Chairman, hi, Board, how are we doing tonight?
Good.
I'm Christian Alex, 23 Temple Street, apartment 301. I don't think this is an opportunity to ask questions, so I'll just make my record in the form of deductions or conclusions based upon information I've collected. This is a city budget process meeting. All city budget process meetings occur in this building. And also, state of New Hampshire received $1.5 billion through the ARPA, and 0% of that as of mid-2022 was appropriated through official state budget meetings or process. Also, in accordance with the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, the CARES Act also was not appropriated through state budget process meetings like this one. So, so there's no opportunity to ask questions, but I would presume that if the city got any of that money, the $1.5 billion, that it was also according to the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute, none of that was appropriated through official city budget process meetings like this one. So $1.5 billion appropriated, not through a meeting. Also, the legal assistance is underserved, according to a statement by Megan Dillon, who's co-director of the Public Benefits Project. There are no appointments available for those that cannot travel more or any beyond 15 miles for tax help in the city until 2025. And I think a good judge of whether something is underserved or overserved is, do we have the hours available in the fund for the expected load for that year? So before we appropriate money, we should ask, how many people do we expect to be able to, or to actually apply? Not that, we shouldn't be denying anyone any service for the reason of not enough resources available.
Just so you know, you have 3 minutes, you have 1 minute left. I just don't want to rush you guys.
Thank you for the reminder, Chairman. So I just asked this, just bring this head up to say basically, we have some questions about where money is going, specifically $1.5 billion. How much of that is in the city? And then, yeah, so basically where is the money going? How is it being appropriated? Is it being appropriated through official meetings? And how much of that money is being appropriated unofficially? And basically, are these programs served, underserved, or overserved? I think that's a really appropriate thing. I mean, according to Megan Dillon, who is the co-director of the...
Your time is up.
Thank you.
And just for reference, any money that comes to the city from the federal government goes through the state.
Yes, state. So, but, okay, so...
Nope, so
Thank you.
time's up. All right. All right, remarks by Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank all the department heads and other people from the departments that came out tonight to speak and really give us some good information about some of this money that we did appropriate. And I look forward to budget season and seeing everybody else come in here. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned at 8:36.